Okay. Is this working? Maybe? Okay, it says live, so I'm just going to assume that it's working. Okay, I see somebody on there. Yay, okay. Thank God. All right, come here, Dottie. All right, well, you then stay down there. All right, so, hello, and welcome to my home. I'm Jenny Lawson, in case you don't know me. I am an author, and I am going to talk to you today about writer's block, which super sucks, but you can overcome it eventually. I am the author of Let's Pretend This Never Happened, and Furiously Happy, and You Are Here. So you would think that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to writing, but what I've really learned is that you never really know exactly what you're doing, and it's all a learning experience. So I'm going to talk to you today about what I have learned personally, what has helped me when I have writer's block. It may not necessarily help you, but maybe it will. So first, I want to start off with the fact that I am currently dealing with a little bout of writer's block myself, because there's so much distraction and anxiety. And, I think a lot of you are, for the first time, you're working from home, and your significant other is working from home, and your kids are home, and it's exhausting and scary. And here's the thing is, I normally work from home, and my husband normally works from home. Do you want this treat? You can have that. And my daughter goes to Correspondence High School, so she's usually here. So it should be that there's not much of a change in our life, but there totally is. So if you were having to go through this significant change and feel like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind, even people who know how to do this shit, they're losing their mind too. So you're not alone. It's totally okay. A lot of people have been saying, I've read this a lot, of people saying, well, Shakespeare wrote King Lear when he was hiding out because there was a plague, and so he was like, I gotta get away from the plague, and that's when he wrote King Lear. And so everybody was like, you should be able to do the same thing. And I'm like, well, King Lear already exists, so I don't need to write King Lear. Also, I thought that was kind of one of his boring ones anyway. And so yeah, but they are right that you should take advantage of this time. A lot of people think that writer's block doesn't really exist, including my husband. Whenever I say that I have writer's block, he says, do plumbers get plumber's block? Sorry, I can't plumb today. It's not quite the same thing because it has to do with creativity. But in some ways he does have a point. So let's go on, and we'll just talk about some of the hints that I have found that have helped me in writing. All right, so one of the things that I find really helpful is refilling your creative cup. Sometimes I get incredibly empty, and sometimes that's because of depression, and sometimes that's because I'm tired, and sometimes it's just who knows why. But during those times, instead of just sitting there and staring at that blank page, a lot of the time what I will do is I will go to read, and I will watch fantastic TV or great movies, things that will inspire me. In particular, whatever it is that I'm trying to write, I try to read things that have a similar tone because I find them very inspirational. So, for example, most of the stuff that I write are essays. So I read a lot of creative essays and humor essays. So if I'm really struggling, I will read David Sedaris or Samantha Irby, people like that, because typically what happens is as I'm reading, some line will jump out, and I'll want to, and this is the mark of a great writer, is when you're reading them and you want to stop and say, oh, that reminds me of this story of something that happened to me that has nothing to do with what they're talking about, but all of a sudden you're like, Oh, that actually would make a really good essay. So it's kind of interesting. Quite a few of my chapters are really just responses to the imaginary friends that I have in my heads that are actually writers. So that is a really helpful one. In particular, I find Doctor Who very inspirational. I don't know why, but especially like old school Doctor Who, like David Tennant era is really my favorite, not error era. Let's see. The next thing is when this is done, go and look up a video on YouTube called Die Vampire Die. And it is the theme song that I listen to whenever I have writer's block. You will probably love it. It's fantastic. Die Vampire Die. It's from Title of Show is who made it. Let's see. Another thing that helps me is switching art forms. A lot of the time when I feel like I can't write about something, like I have an idea of what I want to write about, but I can't find like the right format or the right lead or the right, you can have this if you want it. I'm just holding it for you. Okay. The right format or the right lead. I will instead switch to writing it out as a storyboard. Like a legitimate, like I get a big piece of paper out and I write do little squares and I say like, okay, well, if this was happening in a movie, this is kind of what I would want to concentrate on. And I find that really helpful. One of the things as well, and I'm kind of switching forward in my notes, but one of the things that I found really really helpful was I was having writer's block on writing an essay book and really struggling with it. And it was going on like for years. I mean, I think a lot of people, like Stephen King or Catherine Sinner, or there's a lot of authors that like, they're like, oh, I think I'm going to write a book. And they get on a plane and they get off the plane and they're like, I'm done with the book. And I'm like, how do you do it? Because for me, it takes literally years for each of, I would say I probably average about 5 years to do each one of my books. So on the one that I'm working on now, my essay book, I had been working on it and struggling with it for so long that my agent was like, you have these drawings that you do and people really like them. Maybe you should do a book, based on your art, because that way you can do something and feel like you're doing something, even though it's not going to make a lot of money. It may never sell, but it's something. And it ended up being exactly what I needed to give myself a couple of months of not thinking about like, am I ever going to be funny again? Because I don't feel funny. And instead I focused on that. And that is actually where You Are Here came from. And this accidental book made it on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's just pictures. And so sometimes you can switch it up. The other thing, and I don't know if I ever actually talked about this before, but there's only 23 of you on here, so you're not going to tell anybody. One of the other things that when I was really struggling with the current book that I'm working on right now is my agent was like, why don't you try fiction? And I actually had this great story that I had been working on, but I don't think I'm very good at writing fiction. And I just thought, well, it'll be a good break. It'll be a good, experience just to see if I can. And so every time that I get really stuck on writing my essay, I switch back to that fiction book. And who knows if it'll ever actually come out or not. But there's nothing wrong with having a bunch of different projects going on at the same time. I actually find it can be really, really helpful. Let's see. What else? The other thing on that, when I'm talking about like switching art forms. So for example, on my on the fiction book that I'm writing, I get so into when I can't think of like, how do I move the plot forward, or I know what I want to write, but I'm not sure exactly how I want to write it. A lot of the times I will just be like, you know what, I'm going to design the bedroom of the girl who is the, main character of this. So instead, I just think about all of, what would it actually look like, and how would she fill it, and what would it smell like, and it's nothing that's ever going to actually make it into the book, but it makes it a more realistic world. So it really helps in world building. And as you're working on it and your husband walks in and says, "What are you doing? Why are you drawing a picture of somebody's bedroom?" And you say, it's research. This is my imaginary friend that I'm writing about. And he won't get it, but that's okay. Just keep writing. Let's see. Another thing that really helps me. So I have ADD, and so I take Ritalin, but I can't take it really often because it affects my anxiety. But if I don't take it, then I can't get my work done, and then I'm more anxious, which super sucks. So typically I will take like 3 pills a week. And on the days when I'm not taking it and I need to focus, I will put on YouTube pink noise. You just find it on YouTube. They have like 20-minute ones or hour-long ones. And there's something about it that gets rid of all of the other distractions in my head. I think everybody works different, but for me, pink noise makes an incredible difference. It's also really helpful because the one I listen to I think it's on a 20-minute loop. So I'll turn it on and I'll write, and when it goes off, I'm like, oh, I worked for 20 minutes straight. And that honestly can be a really big deal because sometimes it's so easy to get distracted. So highly recommend. Let's see, another thing. Let's see my notes. Oh, Post-its. Okay. So every time I am writing a book, because it is such a enormous animal, like it's so big, you can feel like, oh, I did all this work all day long and I feel like I did nothing because, it's this tiny bit more, and it can make you feel so overwhelmed that you just sort of give up. So one of the things that I found that was really helpful is put up on your wall a Post-it of every single chapter, every single essay, and just have them all over your wall. And then write on each Post-it what it is you want, like just a 1-sentence thing of like, I'm going to write about buying my dog condoms, whatever it's going to be. And then you write what percentage you've actually completed. So like if I have the idea of it, but I haven't actually written it, then I'd say, okay, it's 10%, right? And then every time that I work on something, I go through and I take that Post-it down and I have it in front of me and I'm like, okay, this is the thing I'm going to work on today. And at the end of the day, I can scratch out that 10% and change it to 12% and put it back on the wall. And it makes a difference because you can actually see every day the scratches with it going a little bit up and a little bit up. And then once you're actually finished with one, you can circle it in a different color, and you can kind of say like, okay, so here are the ones that I still need to focus on. I find it very helpful. Let's see, another suggestion I have is drink. It's not a good suggestion, but it works for me. I think it was Hemingway who said, write drunk, edit sober. And I think that's a great idea, except for when I'm editing. And then I'm like, well, maybe edit drunk too, because it's so awful seeing how terrible you have done. But what I do find is really helpful is at the end of the day, I think a lot of times you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, everything I wrote sucks. This is the worst. I just want to go like have a vodka and go to bed. So here's what you do is, end of the day, have a vodka, come back and just try to write for 5 minutes. Because sometimes there's something, don't do this if you're an alcoholic. I'm not saying you should start drinking. Like, don't do that. But if you're going to drink anyway, take advantage of it, because there's something about drinking that just kind of makes your mind go like, What if I just said, fuck everything? Oh, sorry. Pause due to poor connection, but I think I'm back. Why does your hair look so nice during quarantine? I will answer that question in the end, and you will be very surprised. Okay, sorry. Let's see. So I think I'm still okay. Live. I'm still here. Let's see. So drink, always excellent. Change up the way that you write. Sometimes can be helpful. I will change my font size, like make it bigger, and somehow that sometimes is better. I know other people who always use pens when they write because the analog process, they find it better. I can't do it, but more power to you if you can. Finding readers. This is so helpful. Find a couple of people that you are friends with that you can read your work to. I do this. I am so lucky. Sorry, that's my fire alarm going off because the battery is out on one of them, but I don't know which one, and I can't reach to check any of them. So you're just gonna hear every once in a while the fire alarm go off. Wait, what was I talking about? Readers. So I have 4 friends who I know that I can call them and say, this is really not done, but does this make sense? And what I'll do is I will read whatever I'm working on out loud to them, and I will listen to like what hits and what doesn't hit. And that can be so helpful. You need to have people though who will be honest with you, because if you have people who are just like, yeah, that's, then you know how to work on it. But if they're like, yeah, it's fine, then maybe not so much. The other thing is, you want to have more than one reader, because like I have this issue with, like, I'll write something and I'll send it to my agent and she'll look at it and be like, yeah, it's okay. I like it, but I don't like it as much as your other stuff. And then it'll go to my editor and she's like, this is amazing. Or just the opposite. And so, you never really know. So you don't want to just have one person or 2 people. You really want to have, I would say, 3 or 4. Trust your judgment. There have been chapters where people have been like, don't put that chapter in. And I did, and I'm so glad that I did. However, listen to your critics, because there are a couple of chapters that I put in books that at the time, both my agent and my editor were like, yeah, it doesn't really fit in the book. It's a fine chapter. You worked really hard on it, but I wouldn't add it. And I really pushed, and so I added it, and no one ever says that's my favorite chapter. Never in my entire life has anyone ever said it. So they're totally right. So trust your judgment, but also trust your critics if they have your best interest at heart. Let's see. Having a community to read your stuff can be really helpful. And what I mean by that is blogging. A lot of times I will have something and I have like kind of an idea of how I want to write it. And so I'll blog it, and maybe it doesn't hit, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a really good sign. Or sometimes I'll write something on my blog and I'll just be like, this is just a throwaway thing. Like the Beyonce, the Giant Metal Chicken, that was not supposed to be like a big deal. Like when I wrote that, I didn't even publish it when it actually happened. I published it like weeks later because Victor was really mad at me at the time. He was really pissed about the chicken. And then it ended up being like one of my biggest hits. And I ended up, having, it was one of the pieces that, seldom, but every once in a while there's a piece that'll end up in the book that I had on my blog. But if you're not sharing it, sometimes you don't know like what hits and what doesn't. So experimenting on blog or on Medium or any of that can be really, really helpful to see what hits and what doesn't. Let's see, what is the next thing? Writer's block. Try a different format. This one's very, very helpful for me. A lot of times I'll have an idea and I know exactly what I want to write about, but I cannot figure out how to start it, how to end it, how to make it work. And so I think about all the other formats that I could write it in. So for example, I might say, can I write it in list form? Can I write it as a chronological diary? Can I write it as an open letter to whatever the thing is that I'm angry about? And a lot of times that will be the thing that like hits and I'm like, oh, that's it. Let's see. Keep in mind that writing and then deleting is progress. It is not uncommon for me to spend the whole day at my computer writing and then at the end of the day delete the whole thing, except I don't actually delete it. I just put it in a folder, which is literally enormous, just filled with things that have gone to die. And a lot of times I think people do that and they feel like that's writer's block, but it actually isn't, because that's progress that you need to get through to get to the point where you know what you want to write. So don't feel bad on those days. Those days are steps forward. Let's see. Okay, so if you're dealing with writer's block on, especially on a big project, print what you're working on. Read it in the printed form, which looks different on the computer. I have no idea why. It doesn't make any sense, but it will give you a much different idea of what you're writing. Carry it around with you. People know, I mean, I don't leave my house very often, but like my therapist, she always knows exactly what I'm working on, because every time I go into therapy, I'm carrying this giant book around with me, and she's like, still got it, huh? Still carrying it around. But it is really helpful, I find, because it's a good reminder that it's there, and whenever you have extra time, you can look at it and go, maybe I should go through this chapter. This is the book that I'm currently working on now, which is enormous. And it is, I have 2 weeks to finish copy editing on it, but then it'll be done. That one only took me 6 years. Let's see. So what's another thing? Go someplace else. This one is not easy to do while you are in quarantine, but when I'm not in quarantine, typically about once a year, I will go to this really old hotel where there's nothing to do whatsoever. And I go on like an off time when nobody's going to be there. And I just stay in the room I usually do 3 days straight, because 3 days is about as long as you can do without kind of starting to hate the thing that you're working on. So I'll do 3 days straight. Make sure you get one that has a window that opens or a balcony, because you are going to need fresh air and you don't want to distract yourself by like walking outside. So you just stay in your room, you order room service, or if you're like me, you just bring a bunch of sandwiches because it's cheaper. It can be really, really helpful. The other thing is, if you are working at home, like most of us are, typically I'll kind of say like, all right, I'm going to work on my book, so nobody bother me if you can help from it. But most of the time I really want distractions. I want them to come in and be like, hi, what are you doing? Because I don't want to work. Because writing is hard. But there are times when maybe once a month, when all of a sudden inspiration hits and I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly how to write this. I got it. I know exactly how to. And I know if anybody talks to me, it's gone. So I do make sure that everybody around me knows if I'm ever like in the writing thing and I say, you cannot talk to me right now, that they know to go away, not get their feelings hurt. It's always good to just tell them before, because those inspirational times, they don't always come. Let's see. Clean your house, because here's the thing is, everything is better than writing when you're writing, and so you will want to clean your house. My house is never cleaner than when I have a deadline, but once it's clean, you don't have any more distractions. And come up with something that you really don't want to do, like clean out the garage or something like that, and be like, okay, well, if I don't finish writing, I have to clean the garage. Like, that's what I have to do instead. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe I can write a little bit. Let's see. Walk around with no noise. I just walk the block that's my house. I walk it up and down and up and down. And as I'm walking it, I talk through what I'm writing. And I even have dialogue and conversations with the people that I'm writing about to try to like rework it. Everybody on my blog thinks I'm fucking crazy, which I am, but maybe not as crazy as they think well, no, I am, but in a different way. But there is something about walking while you're doing it. I don't know if it's the blood pressure or the air or the oxygen or just getting out of the house, but quite often that I will find that really helpful. I bring my phone with me so that if I need to write notes, I can do that. Let's see, what's next? Blog, always helpful. Every person is different, so looking out and finding out different things that work for you are gonna be really helpful that don't work for me. So like, for example, a lot of people find that word goals are really where they're like, I have to write, I don't know, 10,000 words a day or this or that. And a lot of people do that very, very successfully. For me personally, I find that if I have something that I want to write about and I write about it in one particular way and it's not really the way that I want to write about it, it sort of loses magic for me. So, so for me, that doesn't necessarily work. God, I wish it did. But it may work for you. So try it because word goals can be really, really helpful. Let's see. Don't force something that isn't ready yet. You can play with it. You can always change it. One of my favorite quotes that I actually have on my computer is, let's see, convince yourself that you're working in clay, not marble. You're working on paper, not eternal bronze. That first sentence can be as stupid as it wishes, which is, who wrote that? Jacques Barzon. I mean, honestly, you can write total bullshit and then change it later. It's fine. There are a lot of apps that also can help you. Grammarly can be really helpful. I don't use it because Grammarly tells me that I write terribly because my stuff is all run-on sentences and ridiculousness. But I learned the rules of grammar so that I could break them. So fuck you, Grammarly. But I think it's really helpful for finding some stuff. There are also a lot of apps that you can use that will shut down everything on the internet so that there's no distractions. And then there's also some apps like Ulysses and Storyist and like there's a bunch of other ones like that that are really helpful. I don't use them because I'm not good with technology, but they're there. Let's see. So those were like my major points, and I did see a couple of questions, so I'm going to answer some questions before we end. Let's see. Okay. You are so prolific. Do you ever have writer's block? Yes. And also, I am not prolific. I started working on my first book how old am I? 16 years ago. And as of now, I only have 3 published. So not really that. It feels like it if you're like, oh, look, she's got another book that's come out. But you're not looking at the 5 years in between where I like bled on the pages and absolutely hated myself. Let's see. What is the best topic to start with if you don't know where to begin? Are there any writing prompts that work? You know, there is one. I'm not sure if it's really a writing prompt, but it's something that Kristen Howerton had used on some of her writing stuff, and I found it really helpful. It was just this line of, this is what I want you to know. And there's something about that line that just made me, if I would write that at the top of the page, I would be like, this is what I want you to know. And then all of a sudden I would be like, you know what, there are some things that I wish people would understand, or that I think can be helpful. So I think that can be really helpful. I think another thing is if you think about, you should always try to write for yourself, because then even if nobody else likes it, you still have it. I have a lot of stuff that I've written that's never made it into the books because either my agent or my editor are like, nah, it's not your best work. But I really like it, and I keep it because I think one day my daughter or maybe my granddaughter or great grandkids, like maybe they're gonna see it and be like, this is great. I love reading stuff from great Mima, whatever. So a lot of times if you're struggling, think about if you're writing a story about your life for someone later on, because how great would that, like if you found something written by your great grandmother right now about what her life was, I would love to read that. So maybe think of that. Let's see. I used to have a blog, but I haven't blogged in months. Should I go back there or start somewhere new? I think you kind of go either way. I mean, that's the great thing about blogs. I mean, I've written on the Bloggess for, I don't even know, more than a decade. But I've had lots of other blogs. I did Mama Drama, I did Good Mom, Bad Mom, I did Ill Advised, I did something on Cafe Press, I had a sex column, I do all sorts of different stuff. So it's kind of a cool thing to try out something new. Also, you could do something anonymous and share some really fantastic, wonderful things. Let's see. Is it okay to write sad things? I feel like everything that I would have to say right now would be depressing. Same. I think it is absolutely okay to write about sad things because, first of all, it is incredibly relatable. Secondly, there's something about putting something down on a page and then allowing yourself to close it that in some ways can be very therapeutic and helpful. There are some times when I write on my blog about my depression, and my husband will look at it and he'll be like, "Boy, you're sure writing a lot of sad stuff here lately," and I'm like, it's not intentional. I would love to write some, funny stuff, but I'm in a depressive period and I need to be, true to myself. And there is sometimes something so cleansing about writing it down and putting it out. It's almost like a small reset button. And I don't know why that is. I think part of it has to do with when you feel that you are completely alone and then you write it and then you see other people go, oh, I thought it was just me. And you realize we're all going through the same stuff. I would say when you're writing, in particular in blogging, if you're writing very negative stuff, be honest, be authentic. Don't share anything that you think might hurt yourself or people that you love, if possible, unless you can maybe ask them first or write it in a way that might not hurt them. I'm trying to think of the best way of saying this. So, for instance, I have some stories in my life that some struggles that I have that I would like to share, but they involve someone who's not me, and I think maybe they're not ready for me to be open about that. Or even they say that they're ready for me to be open about that, but I don't think they're I know. Somebody's at the door. We don't answer the door. Yes, this is quarantine time. Yes. Hello. I know. It's okay. They're just dropping off groceries. It's okay. I know. They're going to go away. Okay. Sorry. So it's okay. it's okay to sometimes do that anonymously. It is also okay. I have an awful lot of chapters that I have written that I'm like, these are going to be really great chapters one day when maybe like, you know, my daughter is older and has the ability to, you know, make decisions on, you know, how much she wants to share about her life. You don't have to publish everything, and you don't have to publish it all in your name. Let's see. And the other thing that I would say that that I think is really helpful, especially if you're blogging about sad things, is if you can at the end let people know, but I'm going to be okay. Or, you know, but I'm working on it, or thanks for your thoughts, or whatever. I think it can be really helpful, because a lot of times I think people will write really sad, depressing stuff, and then they end it with sad, depressing, and then people are afraid to respond because they're like, is this a cry for help? Should I call the police? Should I, you know, what's going on there? And then they don't respond because they're afraid. And then the person who wrote it is like, oh, nobody cares. When really it's not that. It's just a fear. And there shouldn't be the fear, but I'm just telling you, if you want more of a response, if you end it with, don't worry about me, it makes a big difference. Let's see. What's another question? Let's see. I want to write about what I'm experiencing, but I'm too anxious to sit down and do it. Amen. How do I calm down enough? I think I rely on Xanax, but personally, a lot of times you can use that anxiety that you have in many ways can help you to become a very good writer, because people with anxiety, a lot of times they hold themselves to very high standards. My problem with my anxiety is that it causes writer's block, because I get so anxious about everything. I got dog fur in my lipstick and mouth. I'm not supposed to touch my face. Okay. Let's see. I used to have the house to myself, and now I don't. How do I find a physical space to get something done? I think as long as you set boundaries, which is harder if you have younger kids. For me, it's a little bit easier. My office, we don't have an office space, so this is actually the dining room. And so I just made this my office. But that means that there are literally no doors. So it's just a giant open wall that I can see into every room. The kitchen's over there, the living room's there. I mean, I'm basically in the middle of the house. So I just kind of set little rules. Like on this one, I was like, okay, guys, I need an hour. I'm going to talk. I'm going to be on whatever this is called, live for a little bit. Just try to, you know, keep it down if you possibly can. And typically they do the same thing as well. So asking for space can be very, very helpful. Let's see. Also, you can go outside. I mean, I think generally you can go outside. I don't know. I guess it depends on where you are. But I have been spending a ton of time just in the backyard or in the front yard. And I was going on walks, which was lovely until this one person got way too close to me. And then I had a panic attack. And then I was like, what the fuck? I had a panic attack because somebody got next to me. So yeah, I think I'm going to need a little bit of therapy after we're able to come out of quarantine. But find a place in your backyard if you can, and just be like, there's a spot under the tree, and I'm like, this is my area, and no one could come out here for the next hour, because usually an hour is enough, and then you need a break anyway. So just let people know. Let's see. Who do you read the most when you need inspiration to write? Oh, good question. I read, when I need inspiration to write, it depends on what it is that I'm writing. So if I'm writing the fiction book that I'm writing, I read a lot of Shirley Jackson. The essay books, I typically read like Nora Ephron and, like I said, Samantha Irby and David Sedaris, Jack Handey. I read the, who's the Alan Partridge books. I read just anything that is funny, snarky, essay, fact-based. I tend to read the same stuff over and over again because a lot of times if I'm reading something brand new and I really like it, I have a hard time with the jealousy because I'm like, God, I wish I would have written that. But if it's something that I've already read like a million times before, like Santa Land Diaries, where I can read it and I'm not going to be like, oh, I should have thought of that phrase. Instead, I'm like, okay, this is the format. This is how it works. This is, I find it helpful. Let's see. Do you think it would work to have someone check on me, like an accountability partner who wants to write too? I think that can be really helpful. Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, they wrote, what did they write together? Was it Good Omens? I think it was Good Omens. Shit, I don't remember. Somebody will say in the comments. But having somebody to write with you can be really, really helpful. Or an accountability partner who can say, read me what you just did, can also be really helpful. And the last question, what if you feel like you're not good enough to write? Yeah, that's me every fucking day. There's this thing called imposter syndrome, and it is 100% what I live with. I also have avoidant personality disorder, which is basically like imposter syndrome on speed, where I basically just hate everything that I do. And even though logically I know I shouldn't, it still doesn't change the fact that I every day feel like people will say, what did we ever see in her? Like, they're gonna find me out and be like, she's not interesting, she's not funny. I don't know that ever goes away if you have imposter syndrome. But what I have learned is something that Neil Gaiman told me. I wrote about this in one of my books. When I was doing Let's Pretend This Never Happened, I had to do my the audio book. And at the time, this was, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, not everybody always read their audio audiobook. And so my publishers were like, no, we'll have somebody else do it. And I was like, I have to do it. I can't have someone else read my book. And I was so bad at it. I just was terrible, and you could hear the terror in my voice, and it just was awful. And so every sentence the director would be like, cut, no, try to get cut, no, not quite. And so so they were like, why don't you go take a walk? And I knew that they were going to go and call and say, okay, get Betty White in here to do this because she can't do it. And I texted Neil Gaiman and was like, I know you do this all the time. I'm super fucking this up. Do you have any advice? And he said, pretend you're good at it. And so I went in and I pretended to be someone who could read an audiobook. And I finished an entire paragraph without a cut, which was a big deal. And the director was like, I don't know what you just did, but keep doing it. And I was like, I just did a lot of cocaine. No, I'm just kidding. I got some good advice. But to this day, whenever I feel like I can't do something, I write, pretend you're good at it, on my arm. I think I might even eventually have it tattooed on me, but honestly, the ritual of writing it is enough to remind me, pretend you're good at it. And that's what I do every day when I write and I doubt myself and I say, oh, there's the fire alarm. And I say, I can't do this. I think, well, pretend that you're somebody who can. What would you write if you were somebody who could write about whatever that topic was? And it makes a big difference. The other thing is just, fake it till you make it. Don't be afraid to use tools. I did say that I would say, somebody in the beginning was like, how's your hair look so good in the middle of a pandemic? It doesn't. This is not my real hair. This is fake hair that I bought off the internet for $9. I highly recommend it. I don't remember what it's called, Miracle Wire or something. But here's the deal is, nobody knows. Nobody knows that you're using tools, and it's the same thing with writing. Use all the tools that you possibly can. Rely on your friends, rely on yourself, rely on your family. Know that it's okay if you don't have everything perfect, and just trust in yourself and trust in your voice. And keep in mind that I don't read a book every day, but I probably read a book every other day, maybe every 3 days, which means I need a lot of books. And that means that you guys need to be writing books. So write your book, write your story, because I want to read it, and I think the rest of the world wants to read it too. So I think I'm gonna sign off. I think I did it. I think this was supposed to be an hour. I'm sorry I didn't make it an hour, but I super love you guys, and thank you so much for showing up. And if I can figure this out, I will save it, and then I think Mom too will upload it. And yeah, you guys are the best. Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye.